Hello and welcome to Joie de Vivre. So, do you find yourself feeling lonely from time to time? I was recently reading an article that came out in the New York Times about the epidemic of loneliness. That's what they were saying. And just that the number of people who report feeling lonely has significantly increased in the past few years, but also over time, over the past several decades. And one would argue, actually, it's a symptom of our modern lifestyles. We are more separated from each other because of industrialization. That's created, a dispersing of communities. Individuals leave home and go far away to do work. And then you add the pandemic and people working remotely, and then you have even more isolation, loneliness, and disconnection. And so what has happened in this epidemic of loneliness is that many people have gone online to soothe their loneliness, to find relief from it. Now, I'm the first to say technology has done amazing things for us. I mean, right now, I'm able to communicate with you. I'm able to connect with you through technology. And I myself have connected with people that I would never have connected to before because of technology, people in other parts of the world that I never would have met and who have changed my life because of technology. Technology, of course, has contributed greatly to our lives and enhanced them in amazing ways. And yet, there's a dark side. The dark side is that we've become more and more disconnected from each other, from ourselves, and we end up kind of plugged into these virtual universes. And the thing about that, the phenomenon there, is that a lot of us, again, plug into these virtual universes in an attempt to find relief from loneliness. Now, what ends up happening, though, is that we end up in this sort of imaginary realm, and there's something that human beings need in terms of in-person connection that technology will never replace, especially in social media or things like Twitter feeds, where you're just getting a lot of sort of noise, right? There's a communication happening, but again, it's filtered through this pixelated barrier, if you want to call it that. So there is a sense of connection that's happening in our minds, but it's actually a false sense of connection. And the thing about it too is that it's not always nurturing connection, especially if you're on the Twitter feed. A lot of times it's hostile connection. There's an argument happening. There's a lot of bad energy, like negativity, that's happening in these worlds. So even if you're finding, let's say, a group of people that agree with you, and that can be very reinforcing, a lot of negative emotions can come along with the whole process. So you might find yourself with a group of like-minded people, but because you're not actually receiving a nurturing connection, which is what we human beings all need, we get a sense of belonging, but we don't get a true sense of connection. And so there's this false sense of connection. It's almost like, if you're really starving and all you have is a Snickers bar, it's going to do something for you, but you might actually end up feeling sick or just worse at the end of it. And then especially when you unplug and you find yourself alone again, if that's how you actually feel in your world, it didn't really help at all. And you might just find yourself going back on to try to get that false sense of connection because that's better than no connection. And so this is how we end up with online hate groups and conspiracy theories. And even if it's not taken that far, still a number of people who feel more and more lonely and isolated. So what do we do about this? I mean, in the UK, even before the pandemic, they were working on programs to address the issue. And the government was actually hiring individuals to set up a spot to just talk to people. So individuals might have a chair in the park and come talk to me. there was a place to go if people were feeling lonely, different from going to a psychotherapist office, right? This is just an average, ordinary person who's going to talk to you about anything you want to talk about. There's something really wonderful about that. And, in our world now, we've become so withdrawn in a way because of the pandemic, and because we're prone now to turn to technology before we turn to live human beings. We've trained ourselves away from in-person connection, and we need to train ourselves towards it again. Even if that's, having a little bit more of a conversation with the person at the checkout counter. Even if we take an extra moment to make small talk, or a joke, or a compliment, even just something to create connection, so that we're reminded that we're not alone. We do belong. We belong in the community that we're in. The other thing is, if we're going to rely on technology, then at least taking the time to, say, have a FaceTime call or a Zoom call with someone, rather than this digital texting. And I mean, texting is one thing, literal texting or messaging is one thing, but also is being on social media and just, direct messaging or commenting, or all of that is a further removal. There are, again, more barriers to connection there, because you cannot hear the person's voice, or you cannot see their face. Whereas if at least you are FaceTiming or phone calling or on a Zoom chat, at least you have more of a sense of that person's presence, that person's being, and that can help a lot more. It's not the same as being in person, but it helps. It definitely adds more dimension to the connection, and it makes it more real. And so I think we kind of have to stop being afraid of asking for that. That's a big part of it. It's, you can, if you're feeling lonely and disconnected, can you text somebody and say, can we FaceTime? Can you actually ask for that connection? You may find that it's hard to do that the first time, but then if it's well received, oh, hey, that wasn't so hard. And actually then when we got on the phone, I did feel better. It's worth it to just take that risk. It can be very easy to be stuck in the habit of texting and messaging and, doing all this communication through social media. And it's very unfulfilling. And the other thing is, and this is again, if you don't have people in your world that you could reach out to immediately, even just going outside and connecting to the outside world, connecting to the world, remembering that you're not alone. And even if loneliness often feels like being alone in a crowd, right? But that's where I'm talking about connecting with the community in small ways. And what if there's some kind of volunteer work you could do once a week, where you have a chance to connect with other people around a mission or a task. And that's just one example. There are ways you can find connection that's more gratifying than what's online. And the thing is that if we are actually going to heal ourselves as a culture, we're going to need more of that. More people coming together to work towards a common goal that has nothing to do with, politics, let's say, and that has to do with people coming together. And maybe it's just to have a light conversation. I love this idea of what they're coming up with in the UK, and I hope that this is something that can show up in the United States as well. But one thing I want to say here as I conclude this is just that it could be simpler than you think. Sometimes loneliness is a state of mind that we get stuck in. And we feel like it's really hard to break out of it because, it's familiar. It's become a habit. Loneliness, a lonely state of mind has become a habit. And it's hard to imagine that there could be an easy way out. But the more we can really embrace and attune to those really small connections, those small in-person connections, again, whether it's with the barista or with someone else who's walking their dog at the same time or what have you, that those things can be very meaningful. That might not cure your loneliness, but it can give you more of a sense of belonging again. And then one step leads to another. And the more small risks you take to find connection that's not digital connection will make your life feel richer. So if you are feeling lonely, first of all, I want to say you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling lonely. And there are probably other people who would like to connect with you. And so it might just be, again, taking some risks here and there, or taking a step to find a connection in your community, however small that might be. And remembering that you're never going to get your needs met through a digital interface, meaning social media. It's the Snickers bar when you're starving. It's just not going to do it. So there are other ways, and there are better ways to actually get those needs met. Well, this is one piece of that, and I would like to address loneliness again and disconnectedness again in another video down the line, because I do think that this is something that is coming up a lot for people. And so I'm going to do that too. And so be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, if what you can do today is to simply unplug from some of your online distractions and just go outside or call a friend, I think that'd be a great place to start. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful week of connection.